Hello, and welcome to the Middle East Teaching and Learning Conference. My name is Aryeah Mohasses. I'm the founder and CEO of Minerva. We're an education business consultancy here in the Middle East, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about immersive technology and its impact on designing the schools of the future. I'd like to thank the Middle East Teaching and Learning Conference for having me, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts, ideas, some of the recent research on immersive tech and its impact on teaching and learning and how it changes the classroom. So I thought it'd be helpful to kick off by talking a little bit about myself, giving you a bit of a background. So I've been in the region since 1997, and I've had the pleasure of working in the kind of K-12 private industry for about 14 years now. Throughout that time, I've worked for the two largest K-12 private operators in the UAE. And I've had the pleasure of supporting 70 operating private schools on their day-to-day operation, and also working on setting up and establishing 40 brand new schools within the region. At Minerva, our focus really is on helping both investors and operating schools. So with investors, we help them with designing and building and commercially positioning brand new schools and making sure that they're the right fit for what the market needs and what the region wants. But then for operating schools, we also help them out and realizing their full potential. Working on commercial optimization, helping with their corporate strategy, their back office services, and helping them grow. But what's more kind of germane to our discussion today is we help schools with digital transformation and fluency. And that's what I want to focus our discussion on today. That's on immersive technology and really how it will impact and change, and how it can help impact and change how we look at classrooms, how we look at schools, and how we can leverage new technology coming up. So I think everyone at some point has heard about the Metaverse and how it's going to change the world and the future as we know it, and how we'll kind of vicariously live life through our digital avatars. And a lot of that technology is really, really exciting. And it does give us a glimpse of kind of the potential maybe of what the future may look like. But what's great about it is that technology that's being built for this kind of future in mind, and though it's in its nascent stages, can really be leveraged by schools right now and help engage students and be able to kind of help us transform and repurpose the way we use classrooms and the way we use educational spaces right now. So I think what I want to do is really kind of ask some of these questions and have us kind of have an open discussion about some of these points of do we need schools to be designed the way they currently are? I did an experiment a while back running a education technology kind of workshop with a school group. And one of the things that we did to kick off the discussion was we gave all the groups that consisted of school senior leadership, middle leadership, teaching body, as well as operational staff. We gave them Lego blocks, right? And we said, look, what would you do if you could design your school from scratch right now and design it so that it would be sustainable for the next 15, 20 years? And what was really interesting was none of the groups created anything that looked anything close to what a traditional school looks like right now. But equally, every group created something fundamentally different from the next group. So there were ideas around, every school being incredibly, incredibly tiny, but then having a ton of satellite schools. So you don't actually have it built into one location. You have 40 or 50 small satellite schools that can serve a broader community. Other ideas were around, let's look at building schools vertically and taking advantage of that, because the current landscape of schools might be really big and taking up a huge amount of space. So really, this is what I want us to kind of start looking at and thinking about. For example, do we need chemistry labs, or could we create state-of-the-art virtual facilities? And would they be comparable to a real chemistry lab? Do we need schools to be physically as large as they currently are and take up as much land as they currently do? Or are there going to be more sustainable solutions that we could think of that don't impact the quality of teaching and learning, but still offer great access to teaching and learning to our students? And can we design schools really in the future to try to shift the balance that's in the classroom and give students more agency over their learning and over control of where they learn, how they learn? And can school design play a big role in that? So as you kind of look at kind of trying to answer some of these questions and looking at kind of what the potential solutions are, I really want to encourage you all to use the platform and ask questions, and I'll be on there to help answer them as we go through the presentation. So I thought it'd be helpful to kind of define some key terms, because there's a lot of terms out there with virtual reality, augmented reality, and I think it's helpful to kind of have a common language. So virtual reality is a term kind of referred to when, typically when you wear a headset, and the headset essentially encompasses your entire field of view. It tends to be what you would typically think about when you think of immersive technology or when you think of virtual reality. It's those kind of big headsets that cover everything. You don't see the outside world, and everything that you engage with is digital. These tend to be really immersive experiences, but they also tend to be rather singular experiences. And unless someone else next to you is wearing a virtual reality headset, it's very difficult to interact with people in the real world whilst wearing the headset. So there's some really great options out there for this technology. So probably the biggest and the best that comes to mind is the Oculus, the Rift, and the Quest from Meta, which is Facebook. There's the HTC Vive, and then there's the PlayStation VR, which is another really great option. Now, when we talk about augmented reality, which is different from virtual reality, augmented reality allows you to see the real world. And what's interesting with augmented reality is it'll superimpose digital assets on top of that world. So this is great because it allows you to be a bit more social. It allows you to interact with people that might not be experiencing the same augmented reality that you are, because you see the world as it is, but you then have it kind of enhanced with digital assets on top of that. This allows for kind of greater shared experiences and can be used in the classroom quite well and quite easily. Some examples here are Pokemon Go, which kind of took the world by storm, where you use your phone or your tablet to have a AR-based experience. But a really kind of simple one that I think everyone's used in the pandemic are Zoom backgrounds, right? Or Snapchat filters. And if you think of a kind of a product that comes to mind that uses AR quite well, it'd be Google Glass, which are kind of they're typical glasses that have a little digital screen in front of it that then enhances your field of view. For the purposes of the discussion, though, today, I'm going to use the term immersive technology to kind of capture the whole range of AR, VR, mixed reality, MR, as a kind of a catch-all term for our discussions moving forward. So I think as educators, there's a lot of tools out there. Some of them are really expensive, some of them are really affordable. Some of them work well for kind of immersive solo experiences, and others work well as group experiences. And I think moving forward, there is this really strong case to be made for using AR, augmented reality, within schools, because it's a really, really cost-effective solution. And oftentimes it can leverage the technology that you already have in the classroom. If you have an iPad, if you have an Android tablet, anything really with a forward-facing screen and a rear-facing camera can use AR. And the Apple ecosystem, the App Store, has a lot of free apps that schools can leverage already, using the existing technology that they already have to bring AR experiences into their classrooms. And this isn't a market that's going to get any smaller or is going to go away. So the K-12 immersive tech market alone is rising at around 16.2% every year, and is targeted to reach $19.6 billion by 2023. And all of the large tech players are involved in AR or in VR in some form or another. So spoke about Meta, Facebook. They have the Oculus Quest and the Oculus Rift. The Oculus Quest is actually a pretty affordable, high-quality virtual reality experience. Then there's Google or Alphabet. They have Google Glass that I referred to earlier, which is an AR project that's really, really exciting. But interesting enough, on the other side of the spectrum, Google has Google Cardboard. And so Google Cardboard is probably the cheapest way to have access to virtual reality. All you need is a smartphone and some cardboard, essentially. Now, you can buy pre-made kind of Google Cardboard headsets for a couple of dollars. But Google actually online has diagrams and cutouts that you can just print and cut out to create this foldable headset that you can wear. and then you slot your phone into it, and there's a series of apps that'll give you a split screen experience, so your eyes have different views. And it's a really, really affordable, really, really cheap way of entering the virtual reality marketplace. And then there's Apple. Apple has quietly been adding LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging hardware, to their high-end iPhones and their high-end iPads. And LiDAR is really, really interesting because what it does is it allows you to create these kind of really detailed 3D representations of your surroundings and things you can scan. So if you think about having all these assets in the real world and wanting to bring them into the digital world, you need to scan a lot of them, right? And so Apple is slowly growing that market, adding LiDAR hardware to their ecosystem of hardware. But then also they are a leader right now in AR software. The App Store has a huge, huge suite of education-specific AR software that'll help leverage teaching and learning within the classroom. And they're heavily rumored to be having a augmented reality headset of some sort being released in 2023. So that's really exciting as well. So, immersive technology in schools. So what I wanted to talk about is kind of, should immersive tech be used in schools, and how could it be used in schools? And I want to talk about kind of how it can support cognitive load impacts on students, inclusivity, the diversity of experiences that students can have, learning outcomes, safer testing, faster experimentation, driving empathy, and helping bridge the gap between students. I know bridging the gap is really one of the key ones after COVID. I think the challenge that all schools have had is to help students catch up on a lot of learning that they may have lost. So I'll talk about the first one is cognitive load impact. So the Journal of Computer Assisted Learning did a study on the impact that having experiences with immersive technology can have on reducing the cognitive load students experience when they're learning. And so this is particularly relevant for concepts that are quite abstract, that are challenging to visualize, and are complex. And so what the study did was it connected an EEG to a number of students. And they gave them written instructions on how to make a paper crane in origami. And so the students went ahead, they read the instructions, they made the crane. Some did it, to varying degrees of success. They then took a other group of students, and they gave them VR headsets, and they were able to then go through the instructions of how to make the paper crane virtually, being able to actually interact with the instructions as they're going ahead, and then they went ahead and they built the paper crane. Now, what the EEG showed was that the cognitive load on students when they're trying to conceptualize what the crane would look like, what the next steps would be in the folds that they were making, was significantly lower. And students that did that process through immersive technology. But what's also really interesting was that the students that did the immersive technology way of learning how to make the paper crane actually were more effective at making the paper crane, and in weeks after the experiment retained the knowledge better than students that just had the written instructions on how to build the paper crane. So it does show that used in the right way, within the right environment, immersive technology could really have a positive impact and help some students. Inclusivity and diversity. Now, we don't really talk about this as much as I think we should. And I don't think it's considered when we think about how technology can help students, particularly how immersive technology can help students. Historically, I'm talking the last maybe 5-10 years, immersive technology has been really expensive. So schools can only probably afford to have 1 or 2 headsets at the most, and training has been really difficult to get. The suite of software has been really hard to have access to, and when you did have access to it, it was really expensive. But what we've seen in the last few years is that hardware costs have dramatically come down. With more and more manufacturers in the market making these headsets, these solutions are more and more accessible to schools, but then can also play as a democratizing force in helping students that may have not had access to certain experiences get access to really unique experiences that they wouldn't be able to have if it wasn't for this technology in place. Now, a really kind of easy example that comes to mind, I think everyone can relate to, are school trips. School trips are expensive, they take time, and they require permission slips from parents. And not all schools and not all parents and students can afford to go on school trips. But immersive technology can be this really, really great democratizing force to give students access to seeing places and having experiences they may not have historically ever had. Now, I'm not necessarily making the case that the immersive technology experience of climbing Everest is going to be comparable to being there and seeing it yourself. But it is an opportunity to give students access to see something or to feel something that they may not have felt before. And I think that can be really, really powerful. My favorite use of immersive technology is help driving empathy. So it was a really, really interesting study that happened at Stanford University's Virtual Human Interaction Lab with 8th grade Hawaiian students. And what Stanford did was they created an a VR experience to help students get a deeper understanding of what it's like to become homeless. So the school and Stanford University worked together on creating the software and the experience. And essentially what they did was they had students go through what being homeless is like and what the transition to homelessness would feel like. And what was interesting was, despite the fact that students said that the experience was really uncomfortable, and that they felt, uneasy going through the process and kind of having that experience, they viewed it as being really, really positive. And the Stanford researchers saw that empathy within those students grew dramatically as a result of that experience, because they were able to genuinely see, almost kind of, firsthand what it would be like, and how easy it would be to be homeless within their community. They did a similar study with ocean acidification and the impact it has on coral reefs. And so again, students were able to kind of interact with the reef, see what it was like, and then as ocean acidification came in, they were able to see how that reef that they interacted with before, that they had kind of an emotional, personal connection with, how it degraded. And what was interesting with that experience was as students would touch the reef, they could actually feel it vibrate through the controller. So they had some haptic feedback on what the reef felt like before and after went through this kind of extreme acidification. And I think these are really interesting experiences because they'll help students understand and empathize with someone that has a completely different background, a completely different set of beliefs or understandings, and it will help as a really great driving force to give us kind of well-rounded students with a diverse range of experiences. And it has a real impact on learning outcomes. So this research is still quite nascent, and there is going to be more and more studies on this. But evidence has showed that immersive technology can have as much as a 22% improvement effect on learning outcomes within students. It primarily helps with problem-solving skills. And if you follow the constructionist learning theory, that strongly believes that deep knowledge of a subject is built out of the ability to build and interact with either physical or digital artifacts that can be shared. AR, VR is a great environment to be able to do that safely, quickly, and cheaply as well. And then kind of a really easy one is kind of faster and safer experimentation. And we're already seeing great software out there right now that's accessible to schools immediately. So if you want to learn about the Persian Empire, you could read about it, you could learn about Cyrus the Great, or you could put on a VR headset, be there, and then be able to write about how the experience made you feel as opposed to what you learned about it. It has a kind of deeper connection with students. One that I really like is there's this really interesting virtual reality public speaking app. And so what it does is it helps you practice speaking to large groups of people. You put on the virtual reality headset, you can set up kind of the stage. So if you're in a auditorium, if you're in the front of the classroom, and then what it does is it'll simulate a full class of students. The students will be chatting amongst themselves. Some might get up and leave. There's distractions in the room, but you learn to be able to talk to a large group of students. And you can do it safely, easily, and it's repeatable. So you can practice over and over again. Plant life cycle projects are really common within schools. They usually take weeks to months to complete. These can be done in a matter of days in VR and AR, and then it allows time and space to be able to do with multiple types of plants, multiple species. And then obviously the really kind of obvious one in a lot of schools right now is you can run chemical experiments in virtual reality. And what that allows you to do then is to use chemicals that are unsafe, that are difficult to store, that are difficult to transport and bring in the country, and you can remove all those challenges and then have students still be able to engage with that technology, with those chemicals, without the need of fume cupboards and expensive equipment and additional space. And these technologies are also, right now they're in their nascent stage. In the last kind of few years, we've seen them evolve dramatically and become much, much closer to the real life experience that students have using those real chemicals, being in a real lab. Bridging the gap. So this is, a challenge that a lot of schools are currently facing with the return to school. There's a lot of learning that was lost during COVID. And so some students have excelled during that time. Some students have fallen behind. And there's a lot of work on identifying where those gaps are and helping students bridge those gaps. In Shenzhen, China, a high school realized that their students were really struggling with being able to visualize chemical microstructures. And so what they did was they partnered up with a research firm to try to create inquiry-based AR tools that could be deployed within the school that will help the students be able to not only see these kind of complex chemical microstructures, but then also be able to interact with them, combine them in a 3D space to lead inquiry-based experiments. And what was really interesting was that, yes, the research did show that students did better, right, with the AR and being able to visually kind of conceptualize things because of the reduction in cognitive load and the kind of the impact on learning outcomes that we spoke about before. But what was really interesting was that they found that students that were performing poorer in the class did much, much better than students that were doing better in the class. Though everyone improved, the lower achieving students improved much, much more. And that gap between the lower achieving students and the higher achieving students narrowed down dramatically. What they also found, similar to the paper crane example, was that there was significant less memory decay, and students were able to remember what they learned much, much longer as a result of that AR experience. And so, we're creating this technology and we're using this technology in schools because we want to prepare students for careers in the future, right? Where they're going to be working in the future, what they're going to be studying. And AR is being used right now in a lot of really interesting ways within manufacturing. So Boeing manufactures, planes, and one of the key things they have to do is they have to create these incredibly complex wiring harnesses that go up and down the plane's fuselage, and they're essentially responsible for passing electricity through the entire airplane. So they're critical to the success of the airplane, and they're vital. So accuracy is incredibly important. And these are currently done by hand. So there's previously these kind of really big binders of instructions on how to wire these really complex circuits, and that was then transformed into laptops and tablets. So the engineers would have to hold these wiring rigs in one hand and the microchips in the other hand, and be able to wire them by hand and relay those wires accurately. Now, this was great. However, it took a lot of time. It could lead to some errors, and it required a significant amount of training to get engineers up to the level where they're able to do this quickly and at a high level of accuracy. So Boeing looked at introducing AR glasses, so the Google glasses that we spoke about earlier, and gave them to their technicians and created a suite of software that sat in front of that. So essentially what happened was when the engineer would go up and pick up a wire and the circuit that it needed to connect to, it would overlay on top of what they were seeing. So when they would look at the actual circuit board, it would overlay that the cable in their hand would need to connect to point A, and they would be able to see it exactly. And then once they would connect it, they would see that it was a secure connection. It would tell them which wire to pick up. So they just look at the stack of wires in front of them. Through AR, it would highlight the right wire to pick up. they grab that right wire, they look back at the circuit, and they could see exactly where to put it. So this made the process really, really easy and really, really fast for the engineers. And what was really interesting, though, was that oftentimes, they'd have a question or they get stuck somewhere. Typically, what they would have to do in that case before was they would drop everything, go to the tablet, go to the laptop, look it up, figure out what they needed to do, go back and try to figure out where they were and pick up the right pieces again. But with AR, using that technology, well, that stuff can be voice controlled really easily. And so what they can do now is just through voice commands, ask for help, look up diagrams, and be able to get the solution to what they were looking for really, really quickly. So what Boeing saw was what they called a step change. So it wasn't, a 5% increase or 2% increase. They saw nearly a 25 to 30% increase in speed and in accuracy in the work that their engineers were doing. And this is technology that's only going to grow in that industry. Now, we know AR technology is being used in the automotive industry. We know it gets used in complex mass manufacturing. And now it's starting to be used in customer service and in other areas as the technology becomes more accessible and the software becomes more tailor-made to niche needs. Now, I've been kind of talking about how great immersive technology is, the benefits within schools, the benefits within industry, but it's not without its challenges. And there are some really obvious challenges and big kind of, shortfalls of the technology that we need to be cognizant of to be able to get the most out of it. So the biggest thing, and something that, at Minerva, we help a lot of schools with, is to build a really clear digital competency framework and digital strategy for individual schools. Technology is great, and it does help with engagement. It does help with sometimes having a flashy sales pitch for your school. But the worst thing you can do is buy and put technology into schools just for the sake of it. And that tends to be, unfortunately, what happens sometimes when schools adopt brand new technology really, really quickly without a long-term strategy in mind. And it gets used for the first week with one teacher that knows how to use it, and then it collects dust in a storeroom after that. So having it be a core part of your strategy and having it be able to link within the curriculum is really, really important. The second point is teacher training and engagement is critical to the success. Now, it's great to have that technology in the school. It's great to have a part of a strategy, but if teachers aren't comfortable with how to use it and the teachers don't know how to use it effectively, the technology becomes useless. So this is one of the most important things with any new technology. It's more appropriate for immersive technology because it's completely new, and it's difficult to come. There's no kind of replicable background that you could have to that. It's a brand new technology that's being used in schools, and that's why training and engagement of teachers is so vital. That they have the right training, that they're able to use the technology, but then also that, going on to the next point, that it's one of many tools in your kind of digital toolbox, or your digital pencil case in the classroom, right? Not everything it can be used. It's great to have immersive technology done through. It needs to be used tactically. It needs to be used in the right way and for the right reasons, and that's where you're going to get the greatest returns from the technology. A virtual reality, for example, isn't great to be used in extended periods of time within classrooms because, like I said earlier, it can isolate students because unless everyone is in the same virtual reality environment, some students are going to be excluded from that experience. And the last point is around content creation. So I think teachers teach best when they can control the content, right? And oftentimes they create the content themselves. Now, this is an area that's improving more and more, and there are some great new tools out there that allow teachers to create AR and VR content for free. And then they can create really, really compelling pieces of software that can engage students, but it's still very nascent, and there's still a lot left to be done. So I think there has to be a push for creating that content and having that content be homegrown. Now, I spoke about LiDAR sensors being in new hardware coming out. That is going to be really helpful to help teachers to bring in that content and make it digital to the classroom. But this is an area that's going to grow, and with the right training and with the right teaching content tools, I think this is a challenge and a shortfall that can be overcome quite easily. So we've talked about immersive technology, talk about the different types of it, how it can be used in classrooms, the benefits of it, some of the shortfalls, but how can it change the classroom environment? Now, I think a lot of educators will kind of agree on this. Classrooms haven't really evolved. From the late 1800s, when child labor laws came in place and there was an increase in school enrollment, to the kind of industrial revolution that pulled people from rural areas into urban cities and drove, education density. Mass education became a need. So the focus was really on driving efficient education, right? So the one-to-many approach was adopted, and classrooms were designed with, teacher at the front, rows of desks facing the teacher, and the teacher being the sole source of engagement, the sole source of knowledge, and everything kind of flowing from a one-to-many model with a teacher-focused design. And that hasn't dramatically changed. If you go to private schools right now, a lot of your schools, I'm sure, you might not have a chalkboard anymore. You might have a digital screen or an interactive whiteboard, but the layout it tends to be very similar. And so what I want us to look at is, what would the future look like? How can we design our classrooms to be more adaptable? So greater, with more and more research, with accessibility to technology, and really the pandemic, which has forced us to change the way we teach and has forced us to adopt technology rather quickly and be able to kind of learn and adapt and tailor it really, really quickly within a short period of time to meet the needs of our students. We've learned more and more that the traditional approach to classroom design is growing more and more outdated. What we want to look at is, is there going to be a model in the future where we focus more and more on students joining the teacher, and the teacher almost being a tour guide, right, through the learning journey, and with the ubiquity of personal devices being out there more and more, and greater access to really effective collaborative software, students can then engage with each other a lot more in the classroom, outside the classroom. They can also then engage with teachers and students in other countries. And so more and more we're seeing that classrooms themselves need to be much more flexible, much more dynamic, adaptable learning environments to allow teachers to act as great facilitators and guides, but then to be able to change the environment students learn in quite quickly, to be able to meet the needs of the classroom, the needs of the curriculum, but also the needs of the individual students that might vary from class to class, from student to student. So one approach, and again, this is one of many approaches, but one approach that you can look at is, you can use immersive technology to help bridge that gap. And you can use a lot of technology that's currently available within schools right now to lead to adaptive learning environments that are specific to the classroom and specific to the individual teacher. And getting away from that typical design of a rectangular classroom with forward-facing desks. We could have a classroom be really adaptable, have it go from being the surface of Mars 1 second to being a sarcophagus in ancient Egypt that you're looking into. We can have it turn into a science lab, then have it turn into a traditional learning environment. And this adaptability doesn't mean that it has to change all the time, but it means that teachers then are able to tailor that environment to fit the needs of the students, to be able to engage students in the right way, and have that be one of the toolkits that they have. I think flexibility is never going to go away. I think that's going to be something that's going to grow. As students have gone through the pandemic, they're demanding now greater and greater agency over their learning, wanting to learn anywhere, anytime, and we now have the tools to be able to give them that flexibility and have the role of the teacher change to be this guide to take them through that process, but that not to be the only source of knowledge, but to be the guide of how to find the best knowledge and how to learn effectively and how to use that knowledge more effectively, teaching skills as opposed to teaching knowledge. So it was a really interesting study by the Building and the Environment Journal that showed that the classroom environment has huge effect on teaching and learning, up to 25%. And in comparing the best design classroom to the worst possible design classroom, this can account for, classroom design can account for nearly a year's worth of academic progress. And so that's basically the reason I want to kind of highlight that is to show that the way we design our classrooms, the way we use our classrooms can be really, really important. Classroom orientation, the absence or presence of natural light, the acoustics, the temperature, the air quality, the color, the furniture, the layout, all of this plays a huge role in the teaching and learning that happens in the classroom and how teaching and learning influences and impacts our students. And so it shouldn't be underestimated how important this is. And it's something that we can look at because it's a really easy and adaptable thing that we can fix. So I wanted to, first of all, kind of thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. I hope it was an opportunity to maybe learn a little bit more about how immersive technology can be used within schools, how it can help schools leverage what they currently already have and make it better, but also then how you can set up your classroom for the future using what you already might have with a backbone of a robust kind of digital strategy to help teleport your school and transport your school to the future. So, immersive technology is growing. It's not going to be going away. It's going to be something that I think will have a real impact on the classroom and currently already has a real impact within local industry. It's an amazing force for driving empathy, diversity of experiences, inclusion, and overall greater outcomes for students, giving us more well-rounded students. It can help schools become more adaptable, right? You don't need to throw out all your furniture and change everything all at once. You already have a lot of the tools that can help you create this environment that can be dynamic, that can be adaptable, and really help focus on creating environments for your students and not having your students adapt to environments within your school. And all of this, like I said, with the right training, with the right strategy, can be a great tool for schools to use and can leverage. Now, this stuff is just becoming cheaper, easier to access, and I really, really encourage schools to not shy away from experimenting with it and learning from it. It's great when you have students engage in this technology, using it in new and unique ways, and you'll discover new ways of using it just by having your students use it and showing you new methods. I'd like to thank the Middle East Teaching and Learning Conference for having me. I'd like to thank all of you for your time. Like I said, my name is Aryeah. I'm CEO and founder of Minerva Education Business Solutions. We're an education business consultancy that helps schools realize their full potential. You can reach me by scanning the QR code on the screen or just write to us at info@mnrv.org. Thank you again for your time. It was a pleasure sharing this with you and enjoy the rest of the conference.